This week's episode of Berserk is a veritable creature feature, as Guts, Serpico, and Schierke, the superpowered witch, take on a group of malicious trolls, a massive destructive ogre, and a very creepy Kelpie. I can say without hyperbole that this is probably one of my favorite episodes of the Berserk anime series thus far, and that's because we finally got to see one of my favorite elements of the series, which is a lot of badass monster slaying. Currently in the storyline, Guts and his party are being attacked by a group of bloodthirsty trolls who are trying to destroy a village and everyone that they can run into. To make matters worse, a couple of other monsters have decided to make an appearance, a massive ogre and a creature which is known as a Kelpie. First and foremost, I love the designs of these monsters. If there's one thing that the creator of the Berserk series, Kentaro Miura, is really good at, it's creating some really interesting looking beasts. The ogre itself is not like the typical one that you see in, say, like Lord of the Rings, or a Tolkien story, or fantasy story. Its actual physique is very different, especially its head, which is like this weird combination of a whale, an elephant, and dare I say it, a dick. This thing is very phallic and very creepy looking, and unlike a lot of the other weird monsters that we've seen in the Berserk series, it actually has the ability to repair itself. There's a great scene where Guts goes after it, cuts off its arm, and it can just pick it right back up and attach it right back to this bloody stump, and it immediately heals it right back in place. And I love all the little details, like when it loses its arm, all of the trolls immediately just start ransacking it, trying to eat it, but then the troll just takes its arm back, or when it gets slashed across the chest, the trolls continue to try and eat it, but it just knocks them away. It's a big, destructive, regenerating monster, and it's creepy as hell, and honestly, it's the perfect opponent for Guts. It's something that's really big and easy to hit with his gigantic and massive sword. You almost get a sense that Guts is having a really fun time while he's fighting this thing, and it's just a great moment to shock everyone in the village when they see that this one man and his one giant sword can take down something as destructive and creepy as a big giant ogre. And then, of course, there's the Kelpie, which is such a unique creature, to say the least. Essentially, it's this water spirit which tries to drown people, and it takes the form of a horse mixed with a frog. It's a frog horse, and because it is a water spirit, it can actually conjure water, use it as a shield, shoot it like beams, and his opponent is going to be Serpico, who honestly was one of my favorite things in this week's episode. I love the fact that Serpico has become way more in tune with the spirits of his sword. He's not only utilizing it in his abilities to fight, but just the scene where he jumps off top of the church and actually uses the wind spirits to just lightly land is so freaking badass. And his battle with the Kelpie is really insane. And you look at the Kelpie and you're like, that thing looks like a friggin' Pokemon. How could that thing even be dangerous? But it utilizes its weird giant tongue to wrap people up, as well as actually drowning them in water, which it can summon. And apparently the Kelpie is even more powerful in the rain, and of course, it's raining, which means this is going to be a very difficult battle for Serpico, and he even gets heavily injured in this battle. But then that leads us to what I think is probably the coolest scene of the episode, which is when Schierke decides to get in touch with this water spirit, which is one that actually has resided in this village. It's basically the spirit of the river, and she essentially becomes one with this thing and sort of becomes possessed by it and is able to utilize this power, and she's able to basically completely flood the entire village. You have this massive, like, torrent of brown river water which just explodes into the village, just destroying everything in its wake, washing away the trolls, sending the ogre and Kelpie flying, which gives Guts and Serpico the opportunity to decapitate both of them in an extremely bloody, and dare I say it, just plain badass scene. It's a great way to end out this week's episode, but also it lets us delve a little bit more into the world of Schierke, who honestly, I think aside from the action, was probably the best thing about this episode. What I think I love most about the character of Schierke is that she's sort of breaking the conventions of the Berserk world, where at first a lot of people just saw her as this occult witch. She uses magic. It's something that the Holy See would not approve of, and something that they would see as, say, blasphemous. yet she still manages to let them know that the spirits that she's actually communing with are actually the very same angels and beings that the Holy See actually look up to. They just don't actually have a physical way to see them or interact with them, and she's able to tap into their power. So in a way, she's actually allowed the people to realize that her form of magic is just an extension of their very own religion. They might not exactly be black and white the same, but they have a lot of really big similarities. And the imagery attached to all of the scenes with Schierke in this episode were great. Like when she was possessed by the river spirit and you see this giant, angelic-looking water woman who is actually hanging out behind her, just draped over her, covering her in water. And then eventually when she becomes one with this being, she starts to actually lose control in order to use this power. She starts to get, like, possessed by the power of this river spirit, to the point where you can see that, like, her spiritual self is actually lost in this water as it's floating around. She has no consciousness, and they desperately try to bring her back. And the only way they can do that is with this rhythmic tapping of her magic wand, which eventually does snap her out of this. The problem is, while all of this is going on, the river is still rushing through the town, and even though it's gotten rid of the trolls, the ogre, and the Kelpie, it has also gotten rid of Lady Farnace and Casca, who, at the end of the episode, unfortunately, have been captured by the trolls, and they're about to go into a nightmare that you can't even believe. But the end of the episode is really great, because it does something that I didn't expect to see in the Berserk series, which is give people hope. This is a series that is incredibly depressing at times, especially when you see all of the villagers and peasants. But after seeing that Schierke was able to save this village and let them know that her magic is not something to basically scoff at, something to be seen as evil or blasphemous, she brings a lot of hope to them, and you can just see it in their faces and in how happy they are, and it's probably one of the most pleasant scenes that I've actually seen from the Berserk series. And even Guts himself is completely taken aback by the power of Schierke, and actually acknowledges how powerful he is and how incredibly helpful she's going to be to his cause. You can get to see that he's starting to become a little more chummy with his brand new family, and something about that is something that I really appreciate, because when you've seen all of the dark things that Guts has gone through, all of the friends and family that he's lost, it's really great to see him actually form these brand new relationships. But of course, the first thing on their list is getting Casca and Farnace back. The problem is Serpico is going to be hurt, but it looks like Guts, Schierke, and the elves, and of course, Dropey, otherwise known as Isidro, are going to be joining along. Isidro is also a character who got a surprising amount of development during this small little arc right here, and he even gets a brand new weapon at the very end of the episode, which is presented to him by Morgan, this really kick-ass looking sword, which is going to be perfect for him, and he learned a pretty big lesson in these last couple of episodes, and I'm sure he's going to take them with him on his brand new adventure. What's the rundown on this week's episode of Berserk? This was a super exciting episode of the series. I absolutely loved all of the action scenes in this episode. They were hard-hitting, they were blunt, and they had some amazing cinematography attached to them. The scenes with Guts actually fighting against the Ogre were just plain fantastic. I loved all of it. I also really loved the fact that despite the fact that the Ogre and all the other creatures can't actually get to the church, they make it clear that they can use some sort of physical object to actually attach them. And there's a lot of scenes of the Ogre picking up giant wooden beams, going as far as to actually picking up the roof off of a house and trying to crush Guts with it, with him just cutting right through with his sword. It just looks awesome, and it really does do a great job of actually emulating the actual look of the manga series. This is another one of those episodes where I really think it does justice to the manga, because the monsters themselves look like they just jumped right out of the pages. I love seeing color attached to them, especially with the look of the Kelpie, and the actual movements and lines that they use, and the dark colors combined with the actual, like, bright blood just looks so damn just eye-catching. It makes for some really great and just frankly metal and kick-ass imagery, and that's definitely a reason to like this episode. Serpico is also, I think, one of the strongest elements of this episode, becoming more in tune with the wind spirits and utilizing his abilities to fight back against the Kelpie, which was a surprisingly tough opponent. Just like in the manga version, when I saw it, my first thought was, this doesn't really look all that intimidating when compared to some of the other creatures that we've seen in the series, but it has some surprising power, and being able to control water and being in the rain makes it one hell of an opponent for Serpico, who, for the most part, part, just uses his abilities to sort of just defend himself. That is until it gets caught in the water and he just decapitates it lickety-split. But still, it was really great to see that weird, freaky creature. And that's just only the beginning of all the weird monsters that we're going to be seeing in this series. That, combined with all the stuff with Schierke and Guts finally accepting her into the group and being sort of taken aback by her power, makes this a pretty awesome episode of Berserk. Honestly, the second season is doing such a better job of telling the story and presenting it with much better animation and artwork than the first season did, and that's definitely a reason why Berserk fans need to check out this show. So, this episode right here, in my humble opinion, was freaking great. I absolutely loved it, which is why I'm going to give this episode a 5 out of 5. It's got it all. It's got action, it's got characterization, it's got drama, and a great cliffhanger ending, and that's why you should check out this episode. If any of you did watch this week's episode of Berserk, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. What did you think about Guts battling the Ogre, Serpico fighting against the Kelpie, and the sheer raw magic power that is Schierke? What do you hope to see from the next episode of the series and beyond? Make sure to tell me in the comments section. Thank you guys for watching this review. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for all things Berserk anime related. As I said earlier, please leave me a comment telling me what you thought about the episode. I'd love to talk with you guys about it. And if you like this video, one of the best ways to support our channel and this video is to give it a thumbs up and like it and share it with all your friends. If you didn't like the video, give it a thumbs down. I'll see you guys next time. And as always, stay dandy, baby.